Here's some helpful suggestions for anxiety. My name is Jim Squire. I'm a registered psychotherapist here in Toronto, Canada, and I work with anxiety quite a bit. So the thing to understand about anxiety is basically it's pretty simple. It's sort of our body's alarm system. It alerts us when there's danger or there's a problem. Typically it's about things that are happening in our future, things that haven't happened yet. So it's a very real experience, and it's also something that is very helpful. It keeps us alive, keeps us focused, keeps us safe. It's just unfortunately for a lot of people it becomes overactive and then it becomes distressing. So I'm going to go quickly through a few things, just general ways that we kind of work with anxiety. There are different things that'll work at different times, and I'll kind of highlight when they generally are helpful and maybe not helpful. So cognitive behavioral therapy is very helpful. Most people have heard about it. It looks at our thinking patterns and our assumptions we're making. So typically if I'm looking ahead to a situation and I'm anticipating something negative happening, then I'm going to feel anxious. I'm going to have a meeting and I'm not prepared and it's not going to go well and it's going to have a negative impact on my career. I feel anxious. So that is sort of the premise by which we work with CBT. We use worksheets sometimes to take a look at the trigger event. We look at the thoughts and we look at the assumptions we're making about the scenario. For example, we would look at things like evidence for thoughts. If I think that my boss is going to fire me if I do poorly in the presentation, I would want to see, is there any evidence for that? Has he ever said that would happen? Or is it just me, getting triggered and making assumptions? So that's one approach, which is sort of a proactive one that we would work on over time to get a better understanding of our anxiety. What triggers us? What are the thought patterns associated with it? What are the beliefs associated with that? So another approach that's very helpful, which is a similar type approach, but instead of restructuring or changing the thoughts, we would actually observe the thoughts. So there's acceptance and commitment therapy, or in mindfulness, we would sort of notice these distressed, anxious thoughts, and we would not sort of try to change them or anything. We would just kind of notice them, observe them, but not be stuck in them. Now, of course, that takes a bit of work, but it's certainly a very helpful approach. Some people gravitate towards one or the other. It's up to them. So another thing that we would look at is along those lines is when we approach things from a mindfulness perspective, which is very similar to acceptance commitment therapy, is this idea of staying in the present moment. So having ways of focusing on your breath and staying in the present moment will help you not get caught up in what's going to happen tomorrow or next week and help you stay calmer. So the present moment is something that a lot of people are not used to sort of be able to access, but those skills that developed are very helpful. So the other thing we do sometimes in mindfulness is also we get better at observing. As I mentioned earlier, we observe and we notice thoughts and emotions without getting involved in them. So another way of approaching anxiety, and this is a lot more of sort of from the perspective of if we have are very anxious, there's a lot of energy in our system. And so what we want to do then is try to dissipate that energy. So we can do things like go to the gym, go for a run, go for a long walk, do some strenuous physical activity. We can also do some of these somatic techniques like heel taps, where we stand and we kind of bounce on our heels and this over for a period of minutes, release some energy. And then in some cases I like clients to lean forward and just kind of shake their arms out to get all this excess energy out. That's helpful. As a proactive sort of ongoing way of managing anxiety, meditation is great. Now, we don't use meditation when we're anxious and we're triggered in the moment because it wouldn't work. It would just be frustrating. It's something that's more of I'm doing it each morning or before I go to bed every night as a proactive kind of way of keeping my anxiety under control. And so there seems to be sometimes a lot of confusion around when to use these different techniques, and I think some people have been very frustrated by meditation because they're trying to do it when they're very anxious and it doesn't work. So one of the other techniques we use for anxiety is what we call progressive muscle relaxation, where we kind of have this exercise where we go through each of the muscles in the body and we kind of tense them and release them. So I would tense my shoulders and release, and tense my arms and release. And we go through the whole body that way, and it does release some of the tension in our physical body. So one of the other approaches is something to be aware of is avoidance. So people are typically avoiding things that make them anxious, which makes them more anxious. So we have this thing called exposure therapy where we're moving towards the thing that's anxious, and we're doing things like breathing and stuff like that to keep ourselves relaxed and keep ourselves calm to some degree. And so because this avoiding behavior is very intuitive, it's just naturally people want to avoid something that makes them feel bad. But over time, the anxiety gets worse. So usually with my clients, if there's something like, say, going to the mall makes them very anxious, I will suggest that they go into the mall for 15 minutes and then leave, and we gradually build up this exposure to the thing that's making us anxious, and it helps us get just more in control. Now, there's a couple of other sort of quick interventions that I find very helpful to do with breathing, because we have two parts to our nervous system. We have the part that excites and the part that calms. The part that calms is called the parasympathetic nervous system. So there are ways of breathing that can trigger that, so to help us calm down. So one of them is 4-7-8 breathing. So I breathe in for 4, I hold it for 7, and I exhale for 8. Another one that we do is called the psychological sigh. This one is basically like 2 quick inhales and a strong exhale. That will also, trigger your parasympathetic and calm you down. So that is also a great sort of like quick intervention we can use. So we have the proactive, just to kind of summarize, and the reactive. The reactive would be the techniques that, if I get anxious in this moment, what do I do? Certainly things like taking a few minutes to breathe deeply could give you take the edge off, reduce the anxiety to some degree. Things like grounding techniques, naming 5 things in the room that are blue or red, or counting down from 5 to 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 can help us stay grounded. Doing something like rubbing your hands on like a rough surface is like a tactile grounding that can kind of bring us out of our thoughts in our head into our body more, which will help us calm down. So those techniques are very helpful if you get stuck and you're wanting to just reduce the anxiety. And some of the proactive ones, as I mentioned, like frequently doing meditation or relaxation techniques, and making sure you get enough sleep and you're eating well, and generally reducing your stress and taking care of yourself will help also with your anxiety. And if you find that you can't manage it on your own, by all means seek out to a professional. Look for someone like myself who specializes in anxiety, and you can get professional support.